A blood-orange sunset cast long shadows across the dusty Wyoming trail as Clara Jenkins watched her wagon wheel splinter into worthless fragments. Biting back tears of frustration, she slammed her palm against the wagon's side, sending a cloud of dust into the warm June air of 1875. The mountain pass loomed ahead, and with it, her last chance to reach Sweetwater before winter. Now, stranded 10 miles from the nearest settlement with a broken axle and dwindling supplies, Clara faced the bitter realization that her journey west might end right here in the middle of nowhere. The soft rhythm of approaching hoofbeats made her spine straighten. Clara reached for the small revolver tucked in her boot, keeping her hand on the worn grip as a rider appeared from around the bend. The man sat tall in his saddle atop a magnificent chestnut stallion, his face partially obscured by the wide brim of his worn Stetson. "Evening, madam," he called, slowing his horse to a stop several yards from her. With deliberate care, he lifted his hands to show they were empty. "Looks like you've got yourself some trouble." Clara kept her hand near her weapon. "Nothing I can't handle." The corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he surveyed the broken wheel, the exhausted oxen, and her disheveled appearance. He dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle, and when he finally removed his hat, she caught sight of eyes the color of summer sage beneath a shock of sand-brown hair. "Name's Ethan Keller," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Ranch hand at the Double Cross, headed back from Laramie." He glanced at her broken wagon and added with gentle certainty, "That axle won't hold another mile." Clara didn't take his hand. "I'm aware." Ethan nodded, replacing his hat but keeping a respectful distance. "Night's falling fast and these hills get mighty unfriendly after dark." He looked toward the looming mountains. "I know this trail well, madam, if you'll allow it." He swept off his hat again in a gesture both courteous and determined. "I'll get you home." Something about his straightforward offer, devoid of condescension, made Clara consider him more carefully. The setting sun caught the lines around his eyes, suggesting he was perhaps 30 or so, and the way he stood indicated a man comfortable with his own strength, but not inclined to boast of it. "Clara Jenkins," she finally said, releasing her grip on the revolver. "Headed to Sweetwater to take over my uncle's mercantile." Ethan nodded. "That's Joseph Jenkins' place. Heard he passed. My condolences." "Thank you. I barely knew him, truthfully. But he had no children, and I had no prospects in Boston after my father's business failed." She gestured to the wagon. "Everything I own is in there." Ethan circled the wagon, inspecting the damage with a practiced eye. "We can salvage most of your belongings. There's a small homestead about 3 miles north where we can get help and shelter for the night." Clara hesitated. The prospect of spending the night at an unknown homestead with a stranger wasn't ideal, but neither was facing Wyoming wilderness alone after dark. "The Hendersons are good folks," he added, as if reading her thoughts. "Sarah Henderson will be glad for female company." With reluctance born of necessity, Clara nodded. "Let me gather what I can carry." Together they worked as the sun disappeared, transferring essential supplies to Ethan's horse. He tied her oxen securely to follow behind, and when everything was ready, he offered her a hand up onto his stallion. "I can walk," she insisted. Ethan's expression remained neutral. "It's rough country, Miss Jenkins, and these boots were made for riding, not walking. Your city shoes won't last a mile." He nodded toward her impractical footwear. Clara flushed, recognizing the practicality of his argument even as she bristled at needing assistance. With a sigh of resignation, she accepted his hand and allowed him to swing her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "I'll keep my distance, madam," he assured her as they set off, maintaining a proper few inches between them despite the shared saddle. The evening air grew cooler as they rode, and Clara found herself unconsciously leaning back into the warmth of Ethan's chest. His scent leather, horse, and something uniquely his own surrounded her, oddly comforting in this alien landscape. "What brings a ranch hand out this far alone?" she asked, partly to distract herself from their proximity. "Delivering papers to the land office in Laramie. Mr. Cross is expanding the ranch. You've worked for him long, since I was 18. 10 years come October." Clara did the calculation. 28. older than she'd first guessed, but not by much. And you never wanted your own spread, she felt his shrug. Working toward it, got some land staked out north of Sweetwater, building slow and steady. The simplicity of his answer struck Clara. In Boston, men boasted of their ambitions, making grandiose claims about future prospects. Ethan stated his dreams as facts, neither inflating nor diminishing them. The Henderson homestead appeared as a warm glow of lamplight in the gathering darkness. Sarah Henderson, a robust woman with kind eyes, welcomed them without question, while her husband Tom helped Ethan settle the animals. "You'll stay the night and head to town in the morning," Sarah declared, setting a steaming bowl of stew before Clara. "That wagon of yours isn't going anywhere soon." Clara slept in the Hendersons' small spare room while Ethan took the barn. In the morning, over a breakfast of cornbread and coffee, they discussed options. "Tom and I can help salvage your wagon in a day or two," Ethan explained. "But if you're wanting to reach Sweetwater sooner, I can take you there today. It's only about 12 miles from here." Clara considered her options. The mercantile had been closed since her uncle's death 2 months prior. Every day it remained shuttered meant lost income she desperately needed. "I'd be grateful for the ride to town," she decided, "though I hate to leave my belongings." Sarah patted her hand. "They'll be safe here until you can retrieve them. The West may be wild, but neighbors look after one another." This casual kindness toward a stranger left Clara momentarily speechless. In Boston, such trust would be unthinkable. They departed after breakfast, Clara once again seated before Ethan on his stallion. This time, she felt less rigid in his presence, more willing to accept the support of his arm when the trail grew steep. "Tell me about this mercantile," Ethan said as they rode through a meadow bright with wildflowers. Clara found herself explaining her plans to expand beyond the basic provisions her uncle had stocked. "Sweetwater's growing. People will want more than just flour and ammunition. There's a hunger for beauty out here too, I imagine." Ethan was silent for a moment. "That's insightful for someone who's never lived in the West. People are people, Mr. Keller, wherever they live. We all want comfort and a touch of something fine." "Ethan," he corrected gently, "out here formalities don't last long." Clara smiled despite herself. "Ethan, then." As they crested a hill, the settlement of Sweetwater came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings nestled in a valley beside a rushing river. "There she is," Ethan said. "Not much compared to Boston, I expect." Clara studied the frontier town that was to be her new home. "It's perfect," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. They rode down Main Street, drawing curious glances from townspeople. Clara felt suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance and position on Ethan's horse. Rumors would fly before sundown. The mercantile stood at the corner of Main and River Streets, a solid 2-story building with living quarters above the store. Ethan helped her down from his horse and carried her bags to the door. Clara found the key exactly where her uncle's lawyer had said it would be, hidden beneath a loose board on the porch. Inside, the store was dusty but well organized, shelves stocked with essential goods and a ledger neatly detailing inventory and accounts. "He ran a good business," Ethan observed, looking around. "Folks have been missing this place." Clara ran her hand along the counter, already feeling a sense of ownership. "It needs a woman's touch, but the bones are good." Ethan shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "I should let you get settled." "If you need anything, wait," Clara interrupted. "I don't even know how to thank you." His smile reached his eyes. "No thanks needed. Like Sarah said, neighbors help neighbors." He settled his hat on his head. "I'll be back in town day after tomorrow. We'll fetch your wagon then." After he left, Clara stood in the silent store, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of her new home voices from the saloon across the street, the distant lowing of cattle, the rush of the river behind the building. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a flutter of hope. The following day passed in a flurry of activity as Clara cleaned the store and living quarters, introducing herself to curious neighbors who stopped by. Everyone seemed to know Ethan Keller, speaking of him with respect. "Hardest working hand at the Double Cross," said Mrs. Peterson, the baker's wife. "Saved up every penny to buy that land of his, building a proper house before he even thinks of courting, they say." Clara pretended disinterest, but found herself wondering what kind of house Ethan was building. True to his word, Ethan returned 2 days later with her repaired wagon and the rest of her belongings. He wasn't alone. Tom Henderson and another ranch hand had come to help. The axle's fixed, Ethan explained, and we reinforced the wheel, should hold up fine now. Clara insisted on paying them for the repairs and their time, though Ethan tried to refuse. "At least let me offer you supper," she said. "I've managed to make the kitchen habitable." To her surprise, Ethan accepted while the others declined. After unloading her belongings, he returned freshly washed, his hair still damp at the temples. Over a simple meal of salt pork and beans, they talked easily about the town, the mercantile, and Clara's plans. She found herself enjoying his company, his quiet confidence, the way he listened intently to her ideas without dismissing them. "I'd like to reopen next week," she told him. "I've been taking inventory. Uncle Joseph had good stock, but I want to order some specialty items from Denver." "Folks will welcome that," Ethan agreed. "The women especially. Not much finery makes it out this far." Clara studied him across the table. "You understand more than most men would." He met her gaze steadily. "My mother always said a ribbon or a bit of lace makes hard living more bearable. She kept our soddy in Nebraska as pretty as a picture until the day she died." The personal revelation touched Clara. "And your father took off west when I was 12. Haven't heard from him since." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "My mother taught me that a man's worth is in his actions, not his words." "She sounds wise." Ethan smiled. "Stubborn as they come, you remind me of her sometimes." Clara wasn't sure whether to be flattered or offended. "I'm not sure if comparing me to your mother is a compliment, Mr. Keller." His eyes crinkled. "It is from me." He rose to leave. "Thank you for the meal. I'll stop by when I'm in town next week, see how the reopening goes." True to his word, Ethan appeared at the mercantile on opening day, purchasing supplies and subtly directing other ranchers to do the same. Clara found herself watching the door for him on his regular trips to town, their conversations growing longer and more personal each time. Summer ripened into fall, and Clara's business flourished. She expanded her inventory as planned, ordering fabrics, books, and small luxuries that sold surprisingly well. Ethan often brought news of happenings in the countryside and occasionally wild game or fresh vegetables from his own small garden. One crisp October afternoon, Ethan arrived with an invitation. "I've finished the main room of my house," he said somewhat hesitantly. "I'm having a small gathering Sunday next. Thought you might want to see it." Clara understood the significance of the invitation. In Sweetwater, a bachelor inviting a single woman to his homestead was tantamount to declaring intentions. "I'd be delighted," she said, watching color rise in his weathered cheeks. Sunday dawned clear and cool. Ethan arrived with a buggy borrowed from the ranch, and they drove north out of town. Clara wore her second-best dress and a bonnet that Mrs. Peterson insisted brought out the blue in her eyes. Ethan's land stretched across a gentle slope overlooking a creek, with mountains framing the horizon. The house itself was modest but solid, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and the framework for 2 additional rooms. "It's not finished," he apologized, "but it's coming along." Clara walked through the rooms, noticing the careful craftsmanship in every joint and beam. "You built this yourself?" "Every nail," he confirmed, a hint of pride breaking through his usual reserve. Other guests arrived, the Hendersons, some neighbors, and hands from the Double Cross. They shared a meal at trestle tables set up outside, with music afterward from a fiddle and harmonica. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, Ethan led Clara to a small rise beyond the house. "I wanted to show you the view," he said. "This is where I plan to put a porch someday." Clara gazed out at the panorama of mountains, pasture, and sky. "It's breathtaking." "I thought a woman might appreciate sitting here in the evenings," he said carefully, "watching the sunset after a day's work." The implication hung between them. Clara turned to find him watching her, vulnerability plain in his eyes. "A woman would be fortunate to have such a view," she answered softly. Ethan took a step closer. "Clara, I'm not one for fancy words, but I've grown fond of you, more than fond." Her heart quickened. "I've grown fond of you too, Ethan. I can't offer much yet." The house needs finishing, and I'm still building my herd, but I'm steady and I work hard, Clara smiled. Those qualities mean more to me than any fortune. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. I know Boston life was different. I don't want you to feel rushed or pressured. Boston seems very far away now, she admitted. This feels more like home already. Their first kiss was tentative, sweet as fresh honey. When they returned to the gathering, Clara noticed Sarah Henderson's knowing smile but couldn't bring herself to mind. Their courtship progressed through the winter months. Ethan visited the mercantile regularly, helping with heavy deliveries and staying for supper. Sometimes they simply sat together reading by the stove in her apartment above the store, comfortable in shared silence. By spring, Ethan had finished the second bedroom of his house and expanded his small herd to 30 head of cattle. One evening in April, he presented Clara with a small wooden box. I've been saving for this since the day I met you, he said as she opened it to reveal a simple gold band. I know it's not fancy, Clara silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect. They were married in May of 1876, with half the town in attendance. Clara wore a new dress ordered from Denver, and Ethan sported a suit that made him look uncomfortable but handsome. After the ceremony at the small church, they celebrated at the Double Cross, where Mr. Cross himself offered Ethan a partnership that would allow him to continue building his own ranch while earning steady income. Clara closed the mercantile for a week while they honeymooned in their new home. She added curtains to the windows and quilts to the beds, transforming the sturdy house into a home that reflected both their characters' practical yet with touches of beauty. Their first year of marriage brought challenges. A harsh winter threatened the cattle, and Clara discovered the difficulties of maintaining both a household and a business. But they faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger through adversity. In the spring of 1877, Clara discovered she was expecting a child. Ethan's reaction, stunned joy followed by tender concern, only deepened her love for him. We'll need to finish that third room now, he said, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach, and build that porch, she reminded him. I plan to watch many sunsets with our child. Their daughter, Emily Sarah Keller, was born in November, a strong, healthy girl with her father's green eyes and her mother's determined chin. The tiny family spent their first Christmas together in their completed home, with a porch that wrapped around two sides and a nursery painted sky blue. As Clara sat in the rocking chair Ethan had crafted, nursing their daughter while watching the sun set over their growing ranch, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. A broken wagon wheel that should have been disaster had instead led her to everything she now held dear. Ethan joined her on the porch, his hand resting on her shoulder as he gazed at their child. I never thought a broken-down wagon would lead to all this, he said, echoing her thoughts. Clara reached up to cover his hand with hers. When you took off your hat and said you'd get me home, I never imagined you'd become my home instead. He leaned down to kiss her, their daughter nestled between them. Best detour I ever took, he murmured. As darkness settled over the Wyoming countryside, Clara felt a contentment she'd never known in Boston. The path to happiness had been neither straight nor smooth, but every difficult mile had led exactly where she was meant to be. 5 years later, the Keller Ranch had grown to one of the most prosperous in the region. Clara still ran the mercantile 3 days a week, with help from a young assistant, while raising Emily and their 2-year-old son, James. Ethan had built the herd to over 200 head and added a barn and bunkhouse to accommodate the hands they now employed. On the anniversary of the day they'd met, Ethan surprised Clara by taking her to the spot on the trail where her wagon had broken down. A small wooden marker now stood there, engraved with the words, "Where our trail began." Clara traced the letters with her fingers, tears welling in her eyes. You sentimental fool, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. Only for you, he whispered against her hair. Only ever for you. Standing on that dusty trail, Clara thought of all the women traveling west who found not just hardship but unexpected joy. She'd come seeking only independence and found partnership instead a love strong enough to weather any storm, built on respect, trust, and shared dreams. As they rode home together, much as they had that first evening, Clara knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a breakdown on the trail and a cowboy willing to help a stubborn woman find her way home.